hallway there's restrooms and you can do something down there if you need it. And we expect this meeting to run about an hour, but we're not stopping it exactly at an hour. If people want to keep chatting, it's okay to chat for a while afterwards, because we will have some dialogue. So we don't want it to be, we don't want people to feel cut off. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. And we also will accept comments after the fact at comprehensiveplanning@townofmanlius.org. Very long email. So if you think of something, you're on your way home, you say, oh, I wish I'd said that, feel free, just jot us a little. You sent Kevin.
I did sign, Kevin. Yeah.
So we've got the sign-in sheet there. If somebody else shows up, could you pass it to them? Terrific, thank you.
Very good.
Joanne will tell us when.
We're live. It is 6:30. It's launching to Facebook. Did you want me to put all the attendees in as panelists? Or
No, we're going to do. Oh, yes, you might as well put those. There's only two people, right? They can come in. And then we're going to. Everybody, you will need to have a phone with you because we have an interactive activity.
A what?
A phone.
No, we're gonna have a what?
An interactive activity.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it was gonna be a test.
You graded too.
Oh, great.
Oh, Melissa? Oh, no. She was getting the word out.
So with us tonight as well as Grace DeSantis from Barton and LaJudas. Grace is going to kind of help us walk through this PowerPoint that we have. It seems like we've got kind of representatives from all the villages, correct? Which is great. Thanks for joining us. Just before, I guess, Grace dives in here, we just kind of want to reiterate again that. So this is sort of bike ped mobility focus group here tonight. And it's one of several focus groups that the town committee, the comprehensive plan committee, as well as BNL has been undergoing throughout the course of the plan so far. So the town's developing their comprehensive plan. And this is sort of one aspect of the overall plan that we've been focusing on. So Grace is going to go through a little bit of some of the information that we've heard from other focus groups, kind of go through where we are in the process. Again, just because it's important for everybody, at least here, and those that are out there in mobile world, like Mr. Chuck White, understand that, this is one aspect of the comprehensive plan. So it's an important aspect, and really what we're trying to understand, it's early in the process in terms of the transportation network and us understanding it. But what we're hoping to get out of tonight's focus group is really just, again, to help us better understand the bicycle and pedestrian network, mobility concerns, safety concerns, and then some of the high level priorities to sort of fill the gaps between where connections are today, trails, greenways, sidewalks, and where the critical gaps are, and some of the bigger projects that people would like the town to pursue here over the next 10, 15 years. So with that, we thought maybe Grace could take us through, again, just sort of an introductory of where we are in the plan process, and then we can dive into a kind of an interactive thing here where you do have to have your cell phones on you if you are in the room. Go ahead, Grace.
All right. Thanks, Keith. My name is Grace DeSantis. I'm a consultant with Barton and LaJudas along with Keith. I'm a community planner and I work out of the Buffalo office. That's why I'm remote today. Sorry I couldn't be there in person with you all. And I've been fortunate to work with Manlius over the past few months on this comprehensive plan and looking forward to moving it forward. So tonight, what we'll be looking at is a review of comprehensive planning, just to provide some context, what this project is about and why Manlius is undergoing in the drafting of a comprehensive plan right now. Then I'll go over the project process, so the tasks we've completed to date, and also future tasks that will be forthcoming. Then we'll have an introduction to bicycle and pedestrian mobility within the town of Manlius. As Keith mentioned, we have heard some feedback from community members already regarding, what they consider to be concerns in the active transportation network or opportunities that they see for improvements. So we'll go over some of those. And then we will do an interactive polling session. So you'll need to use your phone for this. I can provide you with the link when we get to that step. And then we'll close off with just an open forum, so open conversations to any other ideas or concerns you want to express. So for those of you who are online, feel free to submit any questions you have into the Q&A chat, and I'll make sure to keep an eye on that and pull up your questions as we go through this presentation. So sorry, go ahead.
Before you move on, I didn't mean to leave out Ken over here from BNL, but Ken's here more as a resident than he is.
Did a cyclist.
Right.
Did a Peloton.
All right. So what is a comprehensive plan? It is a document utilized by a municipality that typically contains 4 main components. The first is an introduction and community profile. So this is taking a high level look at your community and discussing, your ongoing housing trends, industrial trends, your employment and economic statistics, all these high level pieces of data that kind of inform you of your community as it stands today. We also look at environmental concerns, your transportation network, which is one of the reasons why we're doing this focus group today. So it really is taking a high level look at these multiple components of your community and drawing key implications from those to set the scene for the other parts of the comprehensive plan. So the second part is a vision and goal framework. This is where your community identifies the overarching vision for its community. So it's typically a statement of 1 to 2 sentences that says, we would like to be X, Y, and Z community in the next 10 years. From there, goals or policies are identified to direct future investments in your town and establish the key priorities that your community members have for the town of Manlius. And then after that, these policies break down into objectives and action items. So these are initiatives that are getting smaller and smaller, more specific in scale until you get to action items, which are items like developing a program or creating a new plan or implementing a specific project. And then the end of the comprehensive plan typically concludes with a community development strategy or an implementation plan, which identifies avenues for completing projects that have been prioritized within your plan. So, who are the key players in your community who can achieve the action items you would like completed? Where are the funding sources? All of those types of items to help guide that investment and development within the future. So the town of Manlius does not currently have a comprehensive plan. So this is the first one that the town is developing. However, there are other comprehensive plans within the area that will be utilized to inform the development of the town's plan. So for example, the villages of Fayetteville and Manlius both have existing comprehensive plans. So it will be important to look at those while the town is developing their own to ensure that the goals aren't conflicting, given that you are close neighbors. And then also the county has both the development guide and a framework for growth. And of course, being a county document, this applies to all the municipalities. So it will be critical to look at that and make sure that the town's comprehensive plan is reflecting the goals that have been identified for the county at large. So many communities opt to develop and implement a comprehensive plan for several reasons. The first is that it's a document that's provided for by New York state law. So while it's not required, it is heavily encouraged by the state itself. It's a document that promotes the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And as I mentioned in those typical components of a comprehensive plan, it's identifying background information of your community that can be useful for decision making. It's identifying those key policies that your community would like to see put in place. And it's developing a framework for implementing key action items that your community members would like to see put forth in the upcoming years. And there are several benefits to having a comprehensive plan. The first is that it establishes town priorities. This is helpful not only for your residents to be aware of, but also for your decision makers, so your local officials. It can strengthen a town's legal position. So a comprehensive plan is typically referenced when approving, project proposals or plans It also can be referenced when you're updating your town's local codes and zoning codes. The comprehensive plan also is a method of encouraging discussion. For example, this focus group right now is a typical component of many comprehensive plan processes. So it's an opportunity not only to inform your local officials and decision makers, but also to hear the voices of your community members and ensure that those are documented in a concise manner in your comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan also can increase your chances of funding. Many grant applications want to see that you have identified key priorities in your community and that they've been vetted by your community members. And the comprehensive plan is an ideal place to do that, typically in that implementation framework that comes at the end of the comprehensive plan, as I mentioned earlier.
Grace, do you
Yes.
mind me, I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you mind letting in the person who's in the waiting room, please?
Somebody in the Zoom waiting room.
Let's see.
I'm sorry to ask you for that.
That's okay.
I couldn't see it on John's screen, so that's why I had to ask you.
I actually don't see a way to add anybody. I don't know if it's because I'm a panelist and not a host.
Oh,
You're the host.
you should be the host next.
Yeah.
Did we make you the host? Yeah.
So you might have to stop sharing screen to see or go to participants and see where you can let somebody in.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay.
Up in attendees, you want to go to attendees.
Yep. I don't
see.
see anything about a waiting room.
Did you see something come up? What, William, did you see something coming up? Oh, sorry, this is like a game of telephone. William said they just needed to monitor it, but I thought he said there's somebody waiting, but I didn't see it in there. Sorry.
That's okay. No worries.
Sorry about that.
And when thinking about a comprehensive plan, I often think it's helpful to think about what a comprehensive plan is not, because as you can tell, comprehensive plans can be very broad in scope. So I think it's important to note that a comprehensive plan is not the end, but it is the beginning of a process. So the process of completing the comprehensive plan is really where you're identifying your priorities, your goals, your objectives, your action items, and then implementing all of those occur once your plan has been completed and accepted by your community. And on that same token, the comprehensive plan is not a reason to expect immediate change. So many of the goals identified in a comprehensive plan might be implemented over the course of 5 years. Some might be shorter. They might be able to be achieved in 6 months to a year, but others might be longer in scope. And so it's important to keep that in mind, that once a comprehensive plan is adopted, that doesn't mean that your community is going to change, overnight. The comprehensive plan also is not permanent or rigid. So these are often updated regularly to reflect your changing community conditions and preferences. The typical life of a comprehensive plan is about 10 to 15 years, but many communities regularly update them, every couple or 5 years just to reflect the changing situation of your community. And then also a comprehensive plan is not a master plan or a strategic economic development plan or a market plan or any of these really specific targeted plans. So the comprehensive plan is your overarching document that takes a high level look at your community, identifies your key priorities, and then underneath your comprehensive plan, you might have more specific plans like an active transportation plan or a housing analysis or something like that. So looking at the project process, so far we have completed a public workshop that was in the spring of 2021, and we also rolled out a community survey then as well. We also have facilitated several focus groups and pop-up events. BNL was involved in some of those, but the steering committee for this project also took a lead on many of those, and we can review them in a bit. We are still completing some focus groups like this one today, and there will be others in the future as well for all of you to participate in. And we also are in the works of developing that really preliminary piece of the comprehensive plan, which is an introduction and community profile. So we have some of that developed, but we're still collecting community data and community input, which will be fed into that community frame or community profile. So looking forward into this year, we will be developing the vision and policy framework. We'll be drafting objectives and action items, and we also will be incorporating a couple of different initiatives that are being driven by the town's Climate Smart Communities grant, like a build-out analysis and a zoning code assessment as well. And then, as you can see in bold at the bottom, we'll have several other opportunities for community input through an open house and public hearings as well. In terms of public engagement completed to date, we have completed so far all of these different methods, starting with the public workshop and community survey, and then about a dozen focus groups as well. This being, the pedestrian and bicycle mobility focus group. And I just want to point out on this screen that we have already received feedback on Manlias's transportation network through a few of these focus groups, particularly the environmental sustainability focus group, the parents and caregivers focus group, and the youth focus group. So while that was not the, intended conversation to be had in those focus groups like it is today, we're seeing that these topics of active transportation, are coming up in several of these different focus groups as well. So the reason we are having this focus group today is primarily because transportation and mobility are a common component of comprehensive plans. And for that reason, we wanted to have a targeted conversation about Manlius's transportation network and bicycle and pedestrian facilities in order to inform that component of the plan. We also are having this focus group because we have heard from previous plans and studies and from your community members, as I mentioned in the focus groups, that transportation is really a high priority for community members in the town. And also having safe streets and having ways to get from destination to destination on foot or on bike. We've heard through several avenues that these are priorities for the town. So we wanted to have an opportunity to dig deeper into that conversation to better inform the development of the comprehensive plan. So some of the plans and studies that we reviewed to date in order to better understand the priorities of Manlius community for transportation include the village's comprehensive plans. So that would be the village of Manlius and the village of Fayetteville. Both of them included a goal to enhance connectivity within the villages and also to improve the walkability of their villages. So I thought that was important to point out that this is not just something that's being discussed on the town level, but also in the villages as well. The villages also have some other plans that discuss walkability and bikeability, such as Fayetteville's Parks Master Plan that identified the Ledger Canal and other areas as potential opportunities to improve active transportation networks. So these are important for us to look at and understand on a deeper level as we continue to discuss how transportation can be better incorporated into Manlius's comprehensive plan. We also took a look at the community greenhouse inventory for the town of Manlius, which acknowledged that transportation accounts for 61% of town-wide emissions. This is important to keep in mind since active transportation can be a method for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, should that be a goal of the town. That can be one method that can be looked at, and we can talk about that as well today if that's a priority. And then we also looked at the Syracuse Metropolitan Transportation Council's 2050 Long-Range Transportation Plan. This had one specific component that I thought would be good to mention, which is that there's an employment center along North Burdick Street, which was identified as lacking public transportation service. So that was a very specific recommendation coming out of that plan for a specific area where it might benefit from public transportation enhancements or perhaps bicycle and pedestrian facilities to better enable employees to get in and out of that area. And then we also took a look at the Fayetteville Manlius Road pedestrian accommodation feasibility study. And this plan identified 3 different sidewalk and path alternatives to be installed along Route 257 between the villages of Fayetteville and Manlius. And this topic came up as well in some of our focus groups as being a key priority area for pedestrian and bicycle facilities. And then I also want to mention before I move on that there have been a couple of other studies in addition to these four, which can inform our project. For example, there have been 2 projects done by local students that talk about what their concerns are related to the pedestrian and bicycle network in the town of Manlius. And the 2 areas that they really focused on were Enders Road and Salt Spring Roads. And those were also mentioned in the youth focus group as well. So that seems to be a high priority for the youth in Manlius. And then thinking about upcoming transportation projects in the town, Centro is planning on piloting an e-bike and e-scooter hub near town center. So this could potentially impact the town of Manlius's active transportation network looking forward, but it also brings up an important point, which is that our active transportation methods are evolving over time. So we're not just seeing people walking and using traditional bikes, but also starting to employ these other types of technologies like e-bikes and e-scooters. And as we move forward with the development of this comprehensive plan, we will be continuing to discuss several of these plans and their implications with the DOT and SMTC as well.
Could you say what those initials stand for?
SMTC is the Syracuse Metropolitan Transportation Council. So they manage the urban areas transportation network around the city of Syracuse and the suburbs. And the DOT is the Department of Transportation.
So I know I've mentioned that we have completed a community survey and also several focus groups. So I just wanted to take a minute to communicate some of the key findings that we have found from these different community input opportunities. In the community survey, we facilitated a SWOT analysis, which asks community members what they feel are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats within their community. And transportation and mobility came up in all 4 categories. So looking at strengths, we found that walkability of the villages was perceived as a major strength in the town of Manlius. For weaknesses, heavy traffic, lack of pedestrian and bicycle amenities, and limited public transportation were frequently cited. For opportunities, maintaining green space and improving walkability, bikeability, and access to transportation were cited several times. And then for threats, increasing traffic and congestion was cited. And a lot of times we can think of active transportation networks as a method to abate high traffic and congestion levels. And then the 3 focus groups that we received active transportation conversations through were the environmental sustainability, the parents and caregivers, and the youth focus groups. So in that environmental sustainability focus group, we heard that more pedestrian crosswalks and safe bicycling routes were important, as well as improved access to public transportation. In the parents and caregivers focus groups, we heard that pedestrian safety was a key concern, and also connectivity to different destinations. And then in the youth focus groups, road safety again was mentioned, increased connectivity was also mentioned, but we also received some very specific recommendations from the students that facilitate or participated in the youth focus group, which are these main areas in blue. And so now if I flip to this map, I just want to point out where those intersections were. So in the youth focus groups that we completed, the key areas of concern were Bowman Road, the Dunkin' Donuts and Fire Station intersection, along and around Route 5, right around here, and Enders Road and Pompey Center Road as well. So those were the key areas identified through our youth focus groups. I think a lot of them resonate with what we heard through the community survey as well, and some of those past plans and studies. And then from our own observations and also just what we heard from the community survey, we have realized that connection between the villages has been brought up as a key priority. And so when we think about roads that are connecting these villages, that could be, Manoa Road, North Manlius Street, North Burdick Street, and then between Fayetteville and Manlius, South Manlius and Fayetteville Manlius Road, Salt Springs, and High Bridge Street as well. So what we want to hear from you today is if you feel that these key findings resonate with you, if you feel that, there are areas that are of concern or opportunity that have not been mentioned already. And so more specifically, what we're looking to hear is, what are the major safety concerns in your community? What are your priorities as a pedestrian or a bicyclist, whether that's just recreationally or whether you are a frequent commuter by foot or on bike? And then finally, what are the main connections that are missing in the community that should be made? So thinking about gaps between key destinations like schools or to key parks, key employment centers, where are those gaps in pedestrian and bicycle facilities that you feel should be filled?
Your turn.
All right, so now we'll get to the fun part, which is the interactive polling session. So now that you've heard me talk for a long time, I would like to hear from all of you as experts of your own community. So if you could pull up your phone or whatever device you have on you and go to pollev.com/GraceDeSantis875, that should bring you to our polling software. And while you all are pulling that up on your phone, I'll just mention how this kind of works. So as I progress through the slides presented on the screen, the question on your phone should update to reflect that which is visible on my presentation. If it doesn't, I would recommend hitting the refresh button, and that should bring you back to the page you're supposed to be on, although it should be moving you automatically. We will also have a couple of map-based questions, so use your fingers to zoom in and out on the screen, and that should make it easier to read some of those street names. And also, as you submit your responses, they'll be populated in real time on the screen, so you'll be able to see not only your responses, but also responses from others who are participating in the workshop.
And I just want to clarify that everybody at home can do this too, and that your information will upload just like everybody else.
Grace, if somebody does this, they're watching this like 2 hours from now, and they signed in to the polling questions, because you're not actively moving things along, could they participate or no?
It's only functional in real time, unfortunately.
Oh, no worries. We have a space, of course, on the comprehensive planning site for people to give us feedback, and they can just send us an email anytime.
Yes. All right, let's get started. Our first question for you all today is, what are your main concerns related to sidewalks and greenways within the town, or bicycling infrastructure as well? So you're able to pick more than one answer. So feel free to choose as many as you feel are important to you. And if you don't have access to the internet with this question, you can also text in your response as well. There's some instructions at the top of the screen. So if you don't have access to the internet, you can text in your answer as well.
Would you identify what greenways are? Is that canals or what? What is greenways?
Go ahead, Grace.
Greenways would be more of the off-road type of trails, like connections between parks, parkways. Keith, I don't know if you have another description.
Trails.
That'd be like a canal then.
Yes, your off-road travel
Yeah.
facilities, your canal trail and parsonage trail.
So it looks like pedestrian and bicyclist safety seems to be getting the most answers at this point at 43%. Public health and active transportation seems to be the lowest. And feel free to chime in too if you want to explain your answer to the group. Or if you feel there's another answer which we didn't include, certainly feel free to chime in and let us know that as well.
Oh, I must have.
Yeah, so we only choose one in this answer, right? But we can change it.
You should be able to pick more than one.
Oh.
You can choose more than one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Grace, I picked 3, so for what it's worth.
Pick 3.
You can also delete your answer if you change your mind. So again, it still seems like safety is top priority here, followed by enhanced connections. I think based on what we've heard so far through the focus groups and community surveys, that seems in alignment with what we've heard from the community so far. And traffic mitigation also seems to be creeping up in points as well. All right. Thank you all. If nobody has any comments, we'll move on to the next one. To what destinations within the town do you or would you like to travel via foot or bicycle? So are you frequently bicycling to get groceries, to go to school, to go to work? Is there a specific park that you would like to be able to bike to, but you can't because there's no bicycle facilities for you to get there? And you should here also be able to upvote and downvote responses by others who are submitting responses. So if you feel like somebody submitted something that resonates with you, definitely give that an upvote. Canal and Green Lakes and Town Center up there. To school. Town Center and Canal and Green Lakes both got up votes. Along FM Road also seems to be popular.
Yeah, I do. I go all over. That's why it's general. Go east to the canals.
You were right.
Yeah.
Covered territory.
Pretty much. We avoid the ones that are dangerous. Yeah, right. That's true. No, I do go on the road. So running is not bad, but you see the cars.
I see Town Center being mentioned in a couple of answers and also Green Lakes.
257, like the root
Say
between the canal and the Great. Where Pearson comes to.
oh, well,
That's dangerous.
that's why I do the canals.
Okay, locations in East Syracuse and the city of Syracuse also has been mentioned. That's something that we hadn't heard so far, so I'm glad to hear that idea as well.
There's some people here who bike a lot further than I do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why too, we take 290 down to the water. Get out of the canal.
Oh, yeah.
I see the canal trail in here multiple times as well.
Grace, is there a way for people to add like other destinations that aren't on here?
Everybody is typing in their own answer.
Okay, so I got it. Okay.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I'm not taking it, but I didn't realize it wasn't a multiple choice.
Yes. So you type in your own answer here and then you see everyone else's responses and can upvote and downvote them. You may need to click refresh on your phone also for everybody who's participating. If you aren't seeing others' responses, just refresh the screen and you should see those pop up. All right. Looks like responses are slowing, so I'll move on to the next question now, which is a map-based question. So where do you feel sidewalks are needed within the town? So I know this looks quite small, so use your fingers to, pinch and zoom into the map to specific locations. Then you can click on the map to drop a pin in a specific area where you feel that sidewalks are needed. You can drop multiple pins, so keep placing those in all the areas that you feel sidewalks are necessary.
Is there a place to put where no sidewalks are necessary?
Mhm.
In the town, because that's pretty impossible. I just asked.
The default is no sidewalks.
I guess so.
Roughly, where's the DeWitt Manlius line? How far up from like here at Evans?
It's at the golf course.
How do you clear a
Yes,
pin?
it's, yeah, it's right around the golf course too.
So it looks like South Manlius Street is getting quite a bit of pins between villages of Fayetteville and Manlius, so Fayetteville Manlius Road. I'm also seeing a lot of responses between Manoa and Fayetteville along Manoa Road, Route 257. And I'm also seeing a couple of neighborhoods as well that are getting multiple drops, like to the west of Fayetteville and also to the east of Manlius. And feel free to chime in and explain your answer as well. I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A.
He says you can
In the
talk.
Q&A, yeah.
Oh,
You can say. So I think one of the features that might be influencing people is the location of schools.
oh, shoot.
There's much more children walking around schools, maybe.
Yeah. the schools.
I'll come in at 5 again, heading out early morning. At dusk, there's a lot of people that are walking down the hill. Catch the bus or to work in town center. And that's.
Where are they coming from? Like Homewood, you mean?
No, so you're working
No,
at the,
5,
yeah.
No, Route 5 from where?
above, basically above McDonald's to Onondaga.
Yeah, I can second that one, Ken. I see that a lot.
They're more apparent because you don't have sidewalks there.
Well, also people who are taking the bus to town center and then walking up North Burdick Street to work at the car dealerships or
The medical center.
yeah.
But those are pretty wide shoulders there.
I can just chime in. I live along Enders Road, that's the middle schooler who goes to Eatonville and I'm a schooler. And I'm constantly driving up and down Enders Road and kids are walking, there's no shoulder. In the winter, they walk, there's high snow banks. Like, it just would be great if all those kids could walk to school.
Right.
If all those kids can walk from Eagle Hill to practices or games or social activities. I don't let my daughter walk, she walks through the neighborhoods, but to me, it's not only do we need sidewalks, there's no shoulder. So some of the other places where we're talking about needing sidewalks have a wider shoulder. I work with Fayetteville Elementary, there's a very wide shoulder along Effingham Road. You know, certainly on where you were talking, there's not a very wide shoulder on Route 5, so I can see sidewalks there, but I think that's.
But Enders Road is really
of
tight.
Whether or not you need sidewalks and how big of a shoulder you have.
Yeah, but we've talked about that, Sarah, and the problem with that is you can't widen it there because of the property lines there. And it would be a sidewalk district, which those people would have to pay for.
Right, well, that's part of what we're doing
And
here
that's
is
why
to
it's so
develop a plan.
difficult. Yeah.
The Enders Road, I'm so sorry, you raised your hand. Do you mind if I'll just say one thing and then just about this then please? The Enders Road is interesting where we are constrained by the space in the shoulder. If we notice still a problem because it would be such a quality or life improvement and such a reduction of like short trips in cars. Maybe there's a way to plan a safe route that is really established and understood between in neighborhoods and through the side roads in a way that's marked and is
Won't they take
Safe.
something back, paths behind those homes, there's a trail?
Yeah, and so for example, that's happening in Homewood neighborhood to town center. There's a trail we've talked about. But anyway, I just wanted to say that I think that that's part of this process is being creative and thinking about these. The goal is the fewer times that families have to feel
And that's
safe.
the thing, traffic is also an issue.
Yeah.
Drop off and,
Yeah.
pick up for sure, so.
Please.
Comment?
Oh, yeah, to your point about property lines, can you explain that a bit?
What?
Like sidewalks and property line issues, can you go into a bit more detail on why that's an issue?
I can't hear what you're
Oh,
saying.
can you go into a bit more detail about
Oh,
why
property
sidewalks? and
Yeah, the
lines
property,
are-
well, what happens is that, and probably Rob can answer it better than me, sorry, Rob. But what happens is that you have so much distance that you have from the road for a sidewalk. You have to have so much distance from the road to the sidewalk. And that distance will now cut into people's front yards and take out hedges and take out trees and take out their fences and all that. And it depends on which side you're working with too. So it's a very difficult project and and that's where it becomes hard to do, you know, because now you're cutting into people's property.
Yeah, so, like sometimes the
Yeah.
edge of the road might be right up against somebody's front yard.
Right, right.
And that edge of the road where that front yard begins might be the highway right of way.
Yeah.
So typically you want to build sidewalks within the road, highway, right of way. And what Ed's saying is oftentimes in order to build that sidewalk, you've got to encumber over that property line on people's front yards, which then you're getting into property takings and things like that. So it makes the project a little more difficult if you're constrained by the width of the road.
Yeah.
And how much room you got between the edge of the road and where you might be able to place a sidewalk and where the property line starts.
And to your point, it's not a wide road, you know, so it's difficult to start with.
Well, conversely, I'd like to add something to that, Ed. I certainly agree that right of way is a constraint that has to be worked through. However, quite often residents have the general understanding that the grass strip right up to the road belongs to them, when in fact there is a substantial public right of way there. So there's a little educational process, I think, that needs to happen as well.
Mhm.
It's a big concern with Anders Road, and I still don't know the answer to this to this day. What are road ways? I don't know if that's a road by use. I know that's one of our older roads in town. So I don't even know if there's a determined actual right of way.
When I looked at GIS, like it does show that the property lines don't go all the way to the road,
So
but would that be accurate?
it depends on GIS. The GIS doesn't always, it's not very accurate with a lot of that stuff. It all determines on when the road and if the road is ever given to the town. So a lot of your older roads was taken over after you take care of the road for 10 years, it becomes a road by use by the municipality. As long as you've been maintaining it, which means basically the property lines go to the center of the road. So the town has the use of that road, it's road by use, unless it was a dedicated road at one point, and I'm not sure if that particular road is or not. So then that would put you where you have a determined right of way, whether it's a 3-rod or a 4-rod road. So I can probably explain it just as well as I can. But I'm not sure what on this road, I cannot tell you. There's a lot of your older roads in the town of Manlias, where your rural roads, and at one point, that was a rural road before all the subdivisions were put in. I don't know for the fact if it is or not.
But that's part of what this process will do, is it would, we would then go and do the research at the county or whatever and find out what was which, based on where people wanted to drop
But to
their
answer
pins.
his question, it does make it more difficult if you don't, if the town municipality doesn't own the land, and you have to do it by a couple different ways. You do by eminent domain, you can purchase properties from the landowners, and that obviously changes your cost. So that's just, in any of those events, you have to create districts for sidewalks, I believe. So in determining who's in that district is another whole section of that too. Who's paying for the maintenance of those particular sidewalks? And sometimes you get a road that only has a half a dozen homes on it. And the cost is just that astronomical to where it would be economics. Yeah, no, so we don't look at it. So we make 8 people pay for the full side.
Could you take a moment to explain the fact that there's town, county, and state roads too?
There is,
Yeah.
There's, as we discussed earlier, the DOT owns a lot of the roads, within the county, there's village roads and there's town roads. So each one of them has different right of ways, each one of them has different maintenance rules, laws, regulations, and what they can and can't do. The villages have, the mayors and or the village board determines what can be done in villages as far as that goes. The town has the determination of what can be done within the towns to a limit. Some of the stuff is done by the state DOT in the towns. So there's an overlap all the time on roads. Again, there's different rules and different regulations for each municipality. It all can be done, it's just a matter of.
But to your point, Rob, you have Burdick Street is a county road.
Correct.
The Route 5 is a state road. Bowman is a town road.
Enders is the only road.
And Enders is a town road, but
It's a town road.
it gets a little more complicated. But
Yeah, again, you know, the liability to all these things, you know, the municipality has to pick up the liability, you know, if you're gonna, you know, put sidewalks in, there's a liability for maintaining those things. I widen the road to make it a shared roadway, there's a liability for the municipality there too. It has to be done to a determined spec by an engineer.
And when the village extended the road in the town, or the sidewalk in the town from the Craftsman down to Mott Road, that was a grant. that,
A safe routes to school.
Right, that they got, and Mark and I worked out, he said, Ed, we'll put it in and we'll maintain it.
Yeah, Mark said
Sounds
something.
good to me.
Mark said
You know,
something
and it worked
like,
well.
Yeah.
he said something like they have 27 square miles or miles of sidewalks in the village. And he said the annual maintenance was $20,000. Is that about
I
right?
think that's what's in their budget.
So that's just to give people a sense of the numbers.
You're talking about areas that have already got established sidewalks. So
Yep.
basically, at this point, they're doing the maintenance.
Totally
They're not
established, yeah.
doing, you know, the actual installation of that.
Yeah, that's the big cost.
And I think to your point, Ken, too, because I know that Ed McLinko extended the sidewalk in DeWitt down Route 5, and he did that with a coordination with the state, and I think he got a grant to do that too. You know, now, that's something to look at, you know.
Have to
from
do this
way,
process
from
too.
this end to going back. you know,
Yeah.
So that's always,
I think that's why this process is so important.
Yeah.
We can't really apply for grants and support without the data and the understanding of the role of the people too. And it's the same thing with the sidewalk program. If you want to neighbor, it's just an option down the line, and Elaine can talk about that too. But I think William mentioned that maybe there were, Grace, do you mind checking the Q&A to make sure there's nothing relevant? You probably did already.
There actually is one, which I was about to bring up. Somebody chimed in to ask if there's been any consideration into making some roads or streets into one-ways. I will say I don't recall that being brought up in any of our focus groups that BNL is a part of or in the community survey. I don't know, Sarah and Heather, if you want to chime in on that idea.
The only one I'm aware of is in the village of Fayetteville.
right.
So if that person has a suggestion of where they'd like a one-way, I'd be happy to hear that.
Yes. So as was mentioned earlier, there is the website for this project, and there's an email on there where you can submit suggestions. So certainly do that if you feel that there's a specific road or streetway you'd like to be called out.
I would say that I heard a while ago from someone who said, if the FM Road Sidewalk project proved completely not possible, that particular strip, she wondered why it wouldn't be possible to talk about rerouting school buses so that there was a reduction in, or, you know, finding a way to make the school stops in different ways or different patterns to make the safety of the roads in the morning different for bikers and riders. So that's just a suggestion someone offered a while ago.
We have to have
Okay.
problem, honestly.
Of course.
So I think let's move on to the next question. Then we have 2 more maps for placing pins on. So the next map we have similar format, but new questions. So where would you like to see on-road bicycle facilities within the town? So before we are identifying sidewalks, but now think specifically about on-road bicycle facilities. So bike lanes, share rows.
Bicycle, right, yeah. So that's where they paint the bicycle in the street, or paint a line, or paint it green, or any of those kinds of things?
Yes,
Not like.
like shared road markings or a designated bike lane on the side of the road, a protected bike lane on the side of the road, something like that.
257 is that way, right? It's a bike. What is it called, Rob? A bike- Shared road, okay, but that's not the same thing we're talking about here, right?
No, it'd be like a chevron with big stencil on
Oh, yeah, okay,
it. Shero.
gotcha, all right.
But it doesn't have to be as extensive as the Erie Canal Trail over in Widewaters. That's a little over the top.
I'm sorry, did I laugh at that?
Do that.
That was a statement.
You don't open it all up, don't you?
I've seen more of those things back there.
Motion on the table is.
Just think, I want to say it again, it's kind of amazing that when I was in New York City, I was on the same trail that is right out on Erie Boulevard, and I could, ostensibly take it all the way
Oh,
from
that's fun.
the West Side Highway all the way up to Erie Boulevard. Very cool.
But you're really in a position where bicyclists themselves, we have to find it by their use of curb.
Well, as a bicyclist of some ability, I will say we've done so by avoiding the centers of all the villages. So if you seriously ride a bicycle, you don't go into the villages.
But I also see them on North Manlius Street going around Green Lakes, and that whole section is precarious as far as the traffic.
Yes, it is.
But it's one of the ones that people really love to do.
Yeah, it's crazy going into Bridgeport or Chenango direction, and that's hairy down through there. It really is.
There's a couple places in it,
Yeah.
and it really gets heavy usage.
Yeah.
So-
I was gonna say, for the
Unfortunately,
record,
it's
I know
not
you're dropping pins down, but are there some highlights that you could share from the cyclist perspective?
Well, like I said, certainly through the center of the village of Manlius is difficult.
Yeah.
The center through the village of town, town center in Fayetteville, extraordinarily difficult. There are pedestrian signals, but those are not the same thing. There's ample shoulder, but that's, great for pedestrians as well. Manoa is great.
Yeah, it's a lot of. Yeah,
Focus on the positive.
It is good with running too.
Is vehicle hard too because there's just no lines on the road?
Exactly. Right.
That and that very.
So it sort of creates an obstacle to the commuter option for people by a bicycle. You can't really get anywhere without going through the village.
Not in the villages itself, but the Manlias Center Road, have you tried riding on that? That's terrible.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like, there's so much debris on, sure.
That's 290 you're talking, right?
Oh,
It's terrible.
yeah, and the road that goes down towards, DeWitt.
DeWitt, yeah.
Court.
Yeah.
That
It's
sucks.
wide, but it's so junked over.
Oh, yeah,
The
it's
state won't
terrifying.
clean it up. That's what they have to do mostly.
Yeah, and then like, I know we're talking about bicycle path, like lanes. I just want to put this out there, just painted on ones are pretty much worthless. Like you see on Fly Road,
Yeah.
that's just an extended lane for a car. And then there's some in the city that do that too. Like I was stopped at a stoplight, I saw a car just drive straight through it, right into the intersection. And so and you even see with the, to a lesser extent, on that, that's not-
Empire State.
Empire Trail over by Home Depot.
Mhm.
Like you have some of those pylons.
They've been driven over.
Yeah.
Oh, they're
The lollipops.
they're getting
Yeah.
kicked off left and right over
If there's
there.
not a cement
Yeah.
barrier
Mhm.
that will
They did.
destroy your car and protect me, like it's terrifying. And like one, there's always surveys why people don't commute with bikes, it's safety.
Mhm.
And, you know, if you're gonna spend the money to do these massive changes and deal with all this regulatory hurdles, which I just explaining, I gave my heart racing. Doing that, you know, might as well do it to an effective extent.
Okay, that's a great comment. Thank you.
So we've never thought, so people, cyclists and pedestrians shouldn't be on sidewalks together, right? But the idea of a lane that's actually got some sort of true barrier that needs to, and there's painted green on the bottom and has signage that's like stay to the right walkers or whatever, that's a different kind of scenario. That's a shared lane that cyclists and pedestrians would use.
And to the gentleman's point too, that, and Heather's reflections on her time in the big city, hopefully the process we're going through here will be productive in the sense that it will help change the culture for those of us who reside in this town, so that it's no longer a strange thing to see a bike lane and that you know what to do when you see it. It's a little bit of a lack of experience in this township with drivers and pedestrians and people knowing how to use those. What did you call bicycle implementation, or what did you? Equipment?
Infrastructure.
Yeah.
But I love how if you go to SU Hill, I love how that's.
The connected corridor that's separated.
Yeah.
But there's some strange things there too, where you park and then there's the bike lane.
So I'm curious about that, because then
They
you can use the
fixed it.
car.
They got rid of it.
They got rid of it.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
very confusing. Yeah.
It's not working. No.
Well, that's really, I'd like to add for the point of discussion here too, that that gives rise to an important point, that bicycling means different things to different people. There's a distinctly different thing that, a bike path doesn't accommodate everyone who uses a bicycle.
Correct.
There's certainly the connectivity part, which is probably the largest focus of this situation here. But there's also, there's the recreation and fun aspect for people for whom they're not going to go on the bike lane to go downtown, they're going to go to the country.
Right.
And then there's the health and exercise and competitive aspect for people who, again, are, a bike path through town center is not going to help them at all. But changing the entire culture of, the driver, pedestrian, and cyclist relationship within our town, it will be helped. They will be helped. And of course, emissions reduction. But
To your point, William, I think, has a study really been done with how much is more recreational biking out there than it is commuting to work? I know there is that, but I think that
On the percentage of the population
Yeah.
utilizing,
for commuting purposes.
for what purposes? Yeah, we have the data.
I don't know.
No, definitely not.
That would really help, because then you could focus
But I
more
think-
Overall, what's the percentage
Yeah.
of people utilize bike paths?
Well, I think it's also
Does that make
important to know
sense?
who wants, that's why we're doing this research, to know who wants to.
Sure.
Because of the e-bike component and the scooter component, there are going to be additional kinds of
Yeah, and that's a whole different. ballgame
mobility.
there.
Well, yeah, but
It's
also
faster, too.
it's faster
Now you got
and
motors with bikers that are not
Well,
motors.
that
How do you
would be something, I actually, this is a question for all of us. That is, the e-bikes and stuff, are they be able to use those on a shared roadway?
Both, you mean the motorized?
So-
Safely?
Yeah, that's what my point is, yeah, safely.
Is that something, if you were to actually do a determined path for cyclists? Now, can they use motorized, e-bikes and those types of
they
things?
can on the
I
Ledger
don't know.
Canal Trail,
They
not
can.
on the Empire State.
I just don't know, it's just a question for out there, is that something that?
It's something I've seen done in other states, up in New England, Vermont, you see them mingling.
But it's something we should really be preparing for here, because now you're getting people, you got walkers, you got regular bikers, then you're gonna have electric bikers
Yeah.
and the speed difference. And then where I see bicycling is actually families. So you've got, two kids on this wobbly thing.
Yeah, they go on the canal.
And you don't want them to be.
What?
Oh, can I offer something on Route 5? Sorry to jump in. I'm not in the room. I'm on the screen, but it goes back to Route 5 coming through Fayetteville. I am too a avid cyclist and experienced. I avoid Route 5 like the plague. I'll go miles around just to stay away from it. It's worth noting though that State Route 5 is a designated bicycle route. It actually goes from Niagara Falls all the way to Massachusetts, and it comes right through our community. And we just should keep that in mind, that as a designated bicycle route, that, you know, it might be a great spot for long-term improvements to help, you know, the recreational cyclists, the commuters, and everybody. Just food for thought.
Thank
Really
you.
interesting, because there's traffic
Thank you.
calming measures that we could think about if we want to make sure to pump it up. And I think what I'm gaining from this conversation so much is that we can't just think about recommending one thing. You have to think
Oh,
about
God.
the educational piece and the, if we're saying this is a value, we have to make sure it's useful information that isn't just gonna leave us high and dry in one aspect, but you know, I had no idea about Route 5
I didn't
being
either.
a designated bicycle. It's obviously not friendly, right? What could we aspire to?
With that, I'm going to move on to the next map. We have one left, and then we can open up for discussion as well. So anybody who wants to stick around longer can do so. So this next map is specifically about off-road facilities. So we talked about sidewalks, we've talked about on-road bicycle facilities, and now we're moving on to off-road trails. So
You're not talking about racing road trails, are you? Not racing off-road, right? It's just.
no, like multi-use paths from place to place.
You're just-
So go ahead and drop your pins. Again, you can drop as many pins as you'd like.
And Green Lakes is
That's-
covered with it.
That's like mountain.
The green trails there are all the trails that
Yes.
are green.
Right,
But
Yep.
but it could be the Erie Canal Trail too, which is.
Right, oh, yeah.
considered
Mhm.
off-road.
Yeah, we
Right.
use it.
And you guys know about the park on Do Good Road, right?
There's trails in
Do you
there,
guys
too.
know about that?
Oh, yeah.
So we're trying to find new places.
I saw a map of like decommissioned, historically decommissioned railways
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
were in this area.
Yeah.
And like if you go by, oh, I don't know, on North Burdick, just before that hardware store,
Mhm.
you can see raised elevated land behind some people's backyards.
Mhm.
That's where like there was.
There was a
trail.
railroad.
Actually, those aren't necessarily part of those trails anymore. Some of those are privately owned.
Right, but I'm saying that it was.
It
At
there
one
was an
time-
opportunity at one point,
Yeah.
you're correct, but now they're also, it's the same problem we have with the highways and sidewalks where.
I know.
These are actually owned by
Right.
individuals.
Yeah, that's why we're Erie Links is and over there.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
taken over.
Bishop Grimes.
And that's
Is
another,
that been decommissioned?
and they're flat too usually.
It's not
railroad
actually
tracks.
used, the one up there at Bishop Farms.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Like,
really
rails
interesting.
and Trails, like project, if you'll try to convert old tracks.
That's a possibility with the town of DeWitt.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's
That's
all
a
right.
big difference.
That's what it
Rails
is.
and
It's the town of
rails.
DeWitt.
When I lived in England, there were many trails that were through people's backyards and through fields and things that people had. And there was a culture of knowing that if you're walking through, you're part of this trail, there's a respect that happens, but there's also an expectation over there of like people knowing that they're part of a historic or a corridor and that it's a big deal to walk over there anyway.
I mean,
But
they have
there
a right
is a
culture.
program
There's a right
for
to
railroad
route.
conversion to walking trail. There is a program for railroad conversion.
But this is where the Ledger Canal would fall into conversation as well.
Yes.
That's one of the things that should be.
And one thing that Green Lakes has been doing is they keep purchasing more property and increasing their trails.
Yes.
which is-
Well, there's a lot of it that's not even on the same side of Route 5.
Right.
It's really moved out.
They said.
Yeah, we definitely want to mention the Ledger Canal as being one of the choices here.
Yeah.
Is that
Where is that?
listed? Is that one of the blues? It's not one of the blues, is it?
No, it's
Oh,
not.
yeah,
I don't think it's listed on here.
No.
Oh, all right.
But it goes behind like Windridge Drive, right? From Manlius over.
Oh, right.
So you're Ed, right? So if in Oneida, the city of Oneida, they have what they call the rail trail, and that's what they did is they reconstituted their railroad into a walking trail. So I know there's somebody who does that.
Yeah, there's the National Rails to Trails program that, has all these resources out for you know, areas that are prime for conversion from rail beds to public trail systems. The Adirondacks has a pretty extensive rail trail system. You know, Tucker Lake, Lake Placid. You know, the municipalities all around upstate New York. Gone through the conversion of old rail beds to trails. It's, you know, a lot of times some of these old rail beds are deeded to the adjacent property owners. So that historically has created some obstacles, but yeah, it's a widely used program. There's a lot of resources out there.
So we should put it on the research.
Would anyone like to explain some of their pins that I'm seeing
I get the
over
question.
here on the eastern?
Where are those going to?
The off-road, I go that. So you just shut that road down.
Where's that, Bobby?
Golf road.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, isn't it,
Why don't you take a bike up there?
I do it all the time.
It's like driving up there.
Rob's got the deeds here.
Golf road is unfortunately, there's homes on Golf Road.
Right.
So it's a through street. So
For them.
for that.
Yeah.
It is we only do it not during the winter, during the summer. The winter we actually close portions of that road. And so we maintain the portions of it during the winter. Just to simply the elevation of it and the grade of the road. You just can't. But yeah, it actually, the reason why we can't close it down is because of what goes on that road.
But it can be,
It's a limited use. for seasonal
right,
use
you
road.
could you categorize it differently?
I don't, right now it's categorized as a seasonal use road. It's maintained by seasonal use road. But I don't know if you could make it, you know, a recreational type road. You know, in type at one time, the snowmobilers used to use it during the winter. That was part of their trail. And they decided.
Snowmobile.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
They actually moved it. So they moved because of partially some of the landowners problems with the damage that was being done to the property.
We
That's
need to
one of the
reach out.
things you have to consider too, when you do these types of things, is, you know, is there the potential? And we talk to the commercial property, residential property, that people are actually putting in.
Well, talking multimodal, we didn't specifically invite snowmobilers, but that's another
Yeah.
form of
Oh.
transportation that, you know, and there is a snowmobile trail.
Oh, yeah.
It's marked here in red.
Yeah, so there must be the club. I mean, let's make sure that we do an action step after this meeting to reach out to them, to
Yeah,
show them this info and also get feedback.
We had tremendous communication with them a few years back, Rob, remember where some of the trails they were on were really too noisy for that area on Horseshoe, I think it was. And we ended up working well with them about rerouting it. Plus, we had the police ticket those that were illegal. Yeah, manifolds. So it's sort of
Oh, to make it
enforced it.
quieter.
Yeah, so they enforced it, which helped, and then they changed their route. So they're good to work with.
Do you still have access to those, to anybody that was?
It's the chip and go snowmobile club that has the trail, that maintains the trail. It actually goes up to Peck Hill, up that direction. Across the Hampton Road.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
It's actually goes up Cold Spring, across.
Yeah, okay,
Oh, yeah, I
all
remember
right,
that.
good, thanks. Anything else about
So
off-road?
the Limestone Creek corridor, creek walk would be greater, trails along the creek. You've got pieces of it from Whetstone to the Mill Run, and then you've got,
All right.
then you've got the break there at 173 in the mall,
Mhm.
block. Then you've got the road down to the county pump station, and then you got that whole piece behind Stickley, there's informal trails back there.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you got
And that's actually, we incorporate that.
Cavalry Circle, and you've got the Huntwood private trail system, and then you've got 92.
And they've got a
Great,
conservancy area back there.
Pardon, the what?
They've got a nature area
Right,
back
Huntwood's
behind
got
it.
its own private trail system for residents.
Right.
Wait, Ken, can you repeat the areas you said? You said the Stickley informal trails, you talked about Huntwood, you said Cavalry Club, behind Cavalry Club.
Coming off the Cavalry Circle.
Okay, thank you.
There's the back of the Huntwood system.
Yeah.
Be that in there.
That's private, yeah.
But the whole, who owns the land behind Stickley down to Cavalry Circle?
The village of Manlius recently acquired some of that land. And it's.
And they wanna do a
They're
trail.
building a trail.
Right, 'cause there's
Oh.
those roads in there.
Mhm.
Link up through and then,
There's some of that, Ken, I can't remember, does Aqua own some of that back in there?
they probably have easements down there.
Yeah.
For their trunks with it. And then I met with the mayor this morning in Fayetteville, and they're looking to get a grant for maybe some stream restoration and trails down through the bird sanctuary, which is below Stack Hospital, above the dance studio.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now we're in villages again.
Yeah, it's currently extremely inaccessible.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that.
Yeah, and that's county's LWRP stop short of that, stop at Route 5.
And it's along the creek, it's actually controlled by the Canal Corporation. Right? So there's another layer of bureaucracy.
Limestone would be state.
Yeah, it's part of the state.
Right.
Also, don't forget the West Branch limestone too. It's fixed through.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. And then there's Edwards Falls.
Oh, yeah. William's got some thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Trails, do you think?
There's no trail along the bank there.
Do you want to let people,
Anymore.
do you want to let people in your backyard for your cool trail?
Absolutely, they're there already. Every now and then fisherman kind of pops
It's
up in
an
the backyard.
opportunity for greenway, and there's pieces of parks that are privately held and then gaps. So it'd be great to be able to travel all the way. To the Empire State Trail.
We didn't talk at all about Three Falls and Sweet Road and up there and connecting the dots from like Troop K up to, like, people are parking a lot.
Yeah, right.
People are parking a lot up along Sweet Road for Three Falls. And if we could do something to reduce the amount of people getting there by car, that would be helpful. And there's also, we heard from the Land Trust when we were chatting at Earth Fest, that there is an animal sanctuary organization that's interested in the barn where the Woodchuck Hill Reserve is now. So taking residents there and being active there for an animal sanctuary. So
Yeah, do people know that
FYI.
there's right at the town line with DeWitt on Woodchuck Hill Road, there's a conservancy there also.
And I know people that run up Henneberry over to Sweet, training for Mount Washington. Okay, and it's pretty much rural out there, but still, there's a lot of traffic. I think that you have to be careful because those roads aren't that wide there. And I'm talking about running now, right, Joe?
we haven't heard from the runners, and I know the SU teams train along on Sweet as well, so we could just send an email out to them and say, hey, what is your Sarah? What if we could ask them what their experience has been with traffic or their athletes with that traffic too. But we'd love to hear the runner's perspective about what's good, what could be improved.
Sure, we pretty much.
I'm absorbing quite a bit from this, and then have to add some comments post and get some feedback at a later time probably.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Okay.
yeah, it's a good idea.
I could add 2 cents from the runner's perspective while I'm not running like I used to. You just need to learn to watch out for yourself and watch your back.
Pretty much.
And I can tell you, I've run everywhere in this town you can imagine and outside of the town through the county. So, and that includes a lot of rural roads, including
Well, I think-
Henneberry and Sweet. So.
Thanks, Chuck. I'd like to go back to William's point about education, that maybe a component of this can be that the share the road communication strategy broadly to try to have people better understand that the world is not only vehicles and that other forms of transportation exist.
It's an educational process.
And the educational process is probably really the only functional tool that we have that can address the safety concerns on a state, county, or local road. Because we don't, we don't have a lot of clout in other areas. And also part of the education, should include the fact that this town does with great frequency produce some very high-level elite athletes who train and, utilize the town infrastructure for training purposes. And it's not just a few people, it's a long history of producing elite level athletes, run, cycle.
FM is well known for FM, cross-country runners.
Yes, year after year.
Back to,
All right, are we gonna like,
percentages of that, so, and I'm all for it, but I'd like to know the percentages of that.
Mhm.
You know, that's what.
Yeah, that's a study.
I'm all for it.
Sorry, Cookie, did you want to say something else?
oh, no, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. So in terms of what you were just asking for, you were interested in how many people use it for commuting, but how many people use it for athletes?
Now, as a whole, the community, what type of percentages are using the roads to run bike? And by what we're discussing here, are we, what are we looking to increase those percentages to what numbers? And obviously expenses versus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know,
Look at it
Joe.
that way,
But Joe, our training runs are up at Green Lakes, but then that's training. But then when you're just out for a run,
Oh, sure.
that's a whole
Every day this
different,
week,
that's a whole different ballgame.
But yeah, no, it's important to know how much, how quote unquote important it is based on how much utilization is to justify spending on something like dynamic signaling or some other things that would go into this. And I would suggest that anecdotally, it is important enough, but we need numbers.
Strava.
Mhm.
There's a program for cities that you can request access to data from it, heat map data. It's not available to the average developer, but it's available to governments. So that could be a way to get that data.
EMAP.
Fantastic idea. That's great because
That's huge.
people are very obsessive about using their Strava. So that'll
Yeah,
give us
right
some
on.
good data.
I don't know what you were talking about.
Strava,
Like an
that's
app?
Map, yeah. it's a-
Oh,
it's a
yeah,
You can
GPS
definitely
mapping.
get that data.
Yeah, Strava, it'll map your run, you can watch everybody else's run, and that's crazy.
Try to beat
So
beat the other guy.
Strava has the EMAP data program for
Yeah.
governance.
Yeah, I think you have to apply for it.
Yeah, but we can do that.
Thank you so much.
That's a great tip. Thank you. All right, we've got about maybe 5 or 7 minutes left before we want to kind of wrap up. So Grace, do you want to move on to what you want to say next?
Sure. So that was the last of the polling exercise. So our intent really was to open up the floor for open forum, which we kind of already started here. I'll just run over some of our next steps will be to download the data that you provided to us through the Poll Everywhere and use that to inform some of the mapping and action items that we put in the comprehensive plan. I've also been taking all of your notes on paper today from your discussion. So thank you all for being so active. It's super helpful. You all are the experts of your own community. So hearing your voices is extremely important for the development of this plan. And if you would like to provide any additional feedback, visit the town website because they do have an email up there specifically for the comprehensive plan. So you can always submit additional thoughts on there. And then before we close tonight, I just want to open the floor again. So if you have any other topics you feel like we didn't discuss today or any specific opportunities or concerns that you want mentioned before we close out, now would be the time.
I'd like to suggest a sort of a round robin here, that everybody just sort of, if there's something that you took away from today or something that you felt we didn't touch on, that we could just kind of make sure everybody's voice is heard. I'm going to start with you, Rob, because I know you're going to be very fast.
As the elected highway superintendent, my concerns are obviously with residents. So a lot of these roads obviously we discussed today are not really town roads per se, but I think that's something we need to keep working. I think we realize that, and I work with today as far as with bicycling, walking, we've got different uses here. So we want to make sure that we're doing one thing for everyone. I'm not concerned about Irish Road and sidewalks. I know it's a concern from our residents. I've heard that for quite some time. We're also hearing from the other
Laura?
I mean, I think for me, there's, again, my coming here tonight is to express a desire for sidewalks along Andrews Road, but I guess I just had two kind of thoughts, like, does having sidewalks increase your property value? I know, if I lived along Andrews Road, I'd be like, oh, I don't want, but at the same time, like, maybe it increases property value, maybe it increases property value for everybody who lives in that area because it becomes a more walkable community. I mentioned I'm also a teacher, so, I closely follow the things that are happening in the FM district. I know that we did a traffic study a few years ago, like, I don't know if you guys have taken that into account, like, there's definitely some issues up there, and I think there could be some really great benefits for the community as a whole, for kids as a whole, for safety, for those kids, buying less buses. I mean, we lived across the street from Andrews Road, and my children had to take the bus. Even as fourth graders, because before they came, that they put a crosswalk at the end of the road, because I asked for that. I'm very grateful for that, but I just see so many kids who cannot walk to school, particularly in the younger grades, because there's no sidewalks. And I teach at Fayetteville, and so many kids walk to school. Because Fayetteville is a much more walkable community than what we have up along Andrews Road. So I think with the high school being up there, we're really missing an opportunity to take advantage of that.
Yeah, thank you. That's great.
I just gave it to you out of curiosity. I didn't realize, looking at the maps, as people started hitting, how much of a need there is for the bicycle lanes and sidewalks, or however we want to make it happen. And also, doing a good job with bikes, I guess.
That's good.
My focus is on sidewalks, especially getting children safely to school and looking at seeing how we can get Andrews Road sidewalks or FM Road as well. And I have a program that I'm trying to develop that hopefully will help us get there. But I don't know.
Do you mind explaining what you're working on?
Sure. So the sidewalk program, it's called the Neighborhood Sidewalk Program, and what it is it really is on the residents to organize their neighborhood, saying, hey, if this is something we want, because the process is such a lengthy thing, right? We need so potentially to create a sidewalk, you'd have to do a district, and so what the program would ask you to do is to get signatures and petitions from your neighborhood saying, yes, this is what we want, this is something we want. You could also look into like how much grant funding you would be able to get, like whether the program would potentially cover 50% or 80%, or there's lots of grants around, so it shouldn't be like 100% on the residents. So it'd be looking into that, and it'd look also into design standards for sidewalks, and also looking into like if we're creating a sidewalk district, what does that look like? Is a district a fourth of a mile away from the project? Is it half a mile? Like, so it's just looking at all those kind of details, but it does put it more on the neighborhood to say, this is something we want, and we've collected the signatures, especially from the property owners, saying we want to work with the town and to really bring everyone to the table to start that process. Is that?
Yeah, it's really helpful. So it's like formalizing what is it, Lauren? What you were just saying, Laura. So it's absolutely making sure that the core activity that will move it forward anyway is getting done.
It has to be neighborhood driven.
Yeah. We're sort of thinking we want to steal that from the tree commission perspective too, to be able to say, okay, people are talking about the trees they want instead of us sort of cherry picking. Oh, looks like maybe you need some support based on
like on the neighborhood.
Yeah. And bringing to bear the data from the town around, oh, here's the tree canopy situation, here's what we know, so that it's coming together of this data that the town should be able to start, having in the experience of maintaining something, plus the needs from people. Thank you.
I just heard about this from like that Fayetteville Library Green Day. So this is pretty cool. This is actually, I don't have anything else to add.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Well, as a runner, I'd love to have as many roads and trails to run on as much as possible, but I think my bottom what I took out of this is I want data. I want to know what the percentage is. Not everybody's running like me. I got to respect the other people that aren't running, that aren't biking, things like that. So I want to see the percentages and will this increase. I think that's my biggest take.
Oh, I'm up. Yeah, I made a few notes here. I think, again, we have to understand the differences, and I know you've heard me say this a million times, between the town and the villages. And with, as Elaine pointed out, with sidewalks, villages, the board says, yeah, we're gonna put them in. In the actuality, the village residents are really responsible for maintaining their sidewalks, but none of the villages put that burden on the residents. So that's why they maintain it. But
Oh, you're saying the town's actually paying for it anyway, it's basically.
the villages.
Right, the
The
villages are.
villages, yes.
Okay.
So, but with the town, of course, we do have to have the district. It is a process, and you have to understand that process. And so I think there's an education that needs to come out of this meeting, which I'm hearing it because I learned some things tonight myself. As far as biking goes, I always like the day when I grew up on a bike, which was a one speed forever, it's a vehicle, it goes on the road. What's the big deal? But that was before the traffic. It was crazy like it is today. So we really do need to look at a better process for biking, as William talked about. We have recreation, we have people that commute, we have families that are just going out for bike rides. We have to identify where they want to go, where they want to ride, what's the safest way to do that. And we just, we need to understand the separation, between the two. So I think that there's a way of working this out. I agree with Joe. I think we need to have a study done with percentages to see where we need to focus most of our work on, our project. So, but that's basically it. A side note, this is more for you guys. I had talked with Ed, right? How could I forget that? I had talked to Carrie Mannion and Rob, and I've talked about 290. And how we need to get the state to clean those shoulders, because I've ridden down there. I've gone down to my place I work out. It's terrible down through there. So that's a step maybe you guys can look into with the town of Witt and Syracuse, but it's mostly town of Witt. So sorry.
But it can be hazardous.
Yeah, and we talked about it, and they were, but
Yeah.
then it was winter.
So William,
Go
well,
ahead.
she's a leader, she doesn't get stuck.
You don't get to talk.
Yes, you don't get started.
I talked too much.
Yeah, I guess, in addition to, just like I said, ensuring that we, promote the same level of safe connectivity on state, county, and local roads, that should be made abundantly clear in whatever plan we develop. But also from today, I just want to make sure we don't overlook the fact that there is a commercial interest here, and that, with an increase in walkability and bikeability of a community, you can support more than what we have is now one bicycle shop. He was great in that birthday the other day, but one, and to my knowledge, no commercial enterprise for runners in the town at this point. And so there's a commercial interest in enhancing and increasing the number of people and the access to walkability and bikeability. And then also, I just don't want it to be forgotten that the towpath improvements into Syracuse are a perfect example of what's possible in terms of technological advances in connectivity and signaling. So it may not necessarily be something identical in our town, but that's a perfect example of what's possible.
And I think that's an example of what a comprehensive plan can do, is when DeWitt decided we're going to do something about Erie Boulevard, they were able to organize the community to support it.
Although there's still an education gap there. Like, I don't see it enough. I don't see people using that. Build it and they won't come.
So Mark.
I have to take my mask off to talk. I don't talk about other words. What I find remarkable here is I happen to be on the comprehensive planning committee in the village of Fayetteville with Sarah, also a trustee. And really remarkable, the problems are the same wherever we go. I want to say that. Number two, walkability in the village, because of our surveys that we've done in our comprehensive planning, is one of the number one issues that everyone finds desirable about the village. So I have to say. The other part that goes along with that is the village has had a very strong emphasis on sidewalks to create that mobility. And I know Manoa does the same thing, as most villages do. And I understand the problem with the town. You and I have had discussions about that before in the past. But that emphasis is really a big deal. Because as Ed said, it's a long-term emphasis that makes a difference. The other part that's sort of interesting, you talk about the low cost in order to maintain those sidewalks, is because we actually utilize our own DPW to take care of it. Right. We don't do outside contractors on it to build sidewalks and to fix them and so on. So we actually have a much better economic model to work with the way we work that way. Now, when it comes to commuting, 95% of the people in the town of Manlius, from the numbers that I've looked at in the past, are all commuting outside of the town of Manlius for work. There's very few people who are using bicycle as a commuting means, by the way. And I knew a couple people who were working at SU who were biking, and they found it very difficult. And your point's well taken, because going down through Genesee Street and on into SU really presented major problems. But that was the preferred route at the time. So that was really what goes on. The other part that I find really hard is the protecting of your bicyclists and your pedestrians from automobile traffic is a really major concern. And it has to be considered very strongly as far as how you're doing. So you may in fact deal with a variety of different mechanisms to do that. The other part that we don't have any good data on yet is what has happened what changes have occurred because of COVID? Do we have actually less commuters? Are we working where we're doing less people are going to work and they're working out of their homes? The other part is because there's now additional state funding in order to bring broadband to more rural communities. And that's a really big deal in the current New York State budget that was just passed. That in fact may change what goes on too, because your educational models and your work models can change very dramatically. Because I've had people who I talked to up in Manoa, forgive me, Marty, that they were working for Saab census, and they would love to work remotely, but they could not because they didn't have the broadband infrastructure. But that impacted directly because that means how many people are going to work if they don't necessarily have to. So there's a variety of things that are interconnected here. That's all I'm saying.
And to that point, we do have a technology, we had a technology, another branch of this today's mobility, but there is a branch on technology that addresses the broadband issue.
I'll add just a couple points that were made on the sidewalks. I think it's a mindset that needs to change, because unfortunately it's the difference between village law, where it's all for one and one for all, for sidewalks. You hear people down in the lower village complaining about the Salt Spring Road sidewalk, and why do I have to pay for that? It's the health, welfare, and safety of the village, right? The town has needs to get safe routes to school as well, and Enders and other places. That's the health, welfare, and safety of town residents, not just a neighborhood. And I know that discussion came up when it was brought to extend down from the school to the corner of 92. And the town attorney immediately went to, well, you only have the daycare center in front, so it's gonna be awful expensive. No, it's everybody in the town. So that's, I think, is a way to come at the informal petitions that need to come before the board, and then for the board to take that position and look at it in that perspective. Jumping over to cycling, Chuck and I kind of aged out of our triathlon days. I think with distracted driving, more and more of us have hung up the road bikes, tri bikes, and everybody's got fat tire bikes and mountain bikes. So this town has tremendous assets in the form of Green Lakes trails, the extension across the street, Fayetteville's investment, Derek's investment in Do Good Trails, which I'm the number one benefactor of that, living right there at the Springview. And I think coming off of this plan, you should consider the town is the connector between the villages and their parks. Market that to the point of capitalizing on it. E-bikes, you've got destinations here be it the Empire State Trail, the city of Syracuse, that bring in economic development, entrepreneurs to use the recreation that can be marketed. You've got campsites, heavy investment in Green Lake State Park. So I think there's opportunity here to tie this all together and for Manlius to advertise its outdoor recreation. Connect all these areas.
Chuck, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I guess, Ken, you hit on a few thoughts I had. But one thing to acknowledge, and it's come up several times, is many of the hot spots in the town are actually on roads that are county or state DOT roads. So I think in the long term, while, there's things that the town could do, one of the best things you can do is work on your partnerships and coordination with those other agencies to help look how we can move these opportunities forward. It's obvious that you can't just go put a sidewalk down Route 257. It's a state highway. So again, those partnerships with DOT and the county DOT are going to be important in realizing some of these goals long term.
Yeah, Chuck, to that end, it's a good point. As part of the early stages of the comprehensive plan process, particularly getting ready for this focus group, we've reached out to New York State DOT simply because of some of the existing roadways that have bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure on them, but also SMTC as an active partner in what we're trying to do here. But SMTC is engaged in studies in Fayetteville and Manoa as well, and are actively looking at how they can become partners with the town of Manlius, as we evolve through this plan. So they'll be engaged at some point as we get closer to identifying recommendations and strategies, and we'll be weighing in on those as well. SMTC is looking forward to how they can work with the town to study things that might require a little more, focused detail of things that we can't quite get to, under the purview of the comprehensive plan. But
Right. And SMTC may have some of that data that you're talking about. They've already done that.
yeah,
So
I'll ask them. Yeah.
So thank you for that. So Grace, anything you want to say to follow up?
I just want to say thank you all for your time and for being such active participants. It's really appreciated. And if you would like to provide any additional feedback, please email the town at their comprehensive planning email. And we're going to have other focus groups upcoming in the future. So stay tuned. You can also subscribe to the mailing list for the comprehensive plans. If you want to be involved in those other focus groups, there are certainly ways to learn about them and to stay involved.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Everyone have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can the